And we're back with freeCodeCamp, still JavaScript, and we should be right here. Debugging, it's only 12 tasks. It's a quicker one, and it shows you how you can find mistakes in your code. First helping tool is the console.log. In this case, it displays the sum AB, which equals a plus b, which would be 5 plus 1, but a is incremented, so we'll get 7. And if we place it, for example, here, console.log and display a, we'll also get the 6, so which would be let a equals 5 and then incremented by 1. So you can use that to check certain variables, for example. And it helps in the debugging process, so in the process of finding mistakes in your code or checking if mistakes are there. Let's move on. There's a difference between the platform freeCodeCamp and what we have in our browser. For example, I use Firefox for my tutorials. Don't get confused, I use a German version, or I've set it to German by default, so it has a different name, but it's the developer tools in English. In my case, it's called Werkzeuge für Webentwickler, and you can find it at the top right of your Firefox. Let me resize my window a little bit, and here I have it. So it would be Ctrl-Shift-I would be the shortkey for it, and then there's this console that we can use directly in the browser right here, and you can type, for example, console.log into it. If we use it here for our output, which is initialized to get this to show once in freeCodeCamp console and not at all in the browser console, if we write console.log with the value of output, there will be a reference error, so our output is not defined. And we can clear it by using console.clear. So let me type it in. And then I enter it, and it's going to empty my console. Let me close it, and now I type it into the freeCodeCamp platform. Let me resize my window a little bit. So if I write console.log output right here, it's going to get displayed right here at the bottom. So output is defined in this case, but it doesn't work with our web browser developer tools. That's just the difference between what's happening on freeCodeCamp when we type it in and what would happen if we were to use the developer tools. We're good here. Let's move on. We have this typeof that we can use as a helping tool to check what type our variables are. Here in the first case we've got a string, second case is a number, third and fourth would be objects. There are more types, for example Boolean, null and undefined. Now let's check that on the right hand side. So we've got two variables 7 and 3. If we use console.log for each and then typeof and then use the variable names, you can see the first one is a number and the second one is a string, and this is going to get printed out. Right here, that's the number. And here's our string. Here's a typical mistake that I used to do. So it's important to check your variables for typos. For example, on the right hand side we have two receivables and payables as variable names. They are declared and initialized in the first two lines. And in the third line we've got the two typos. Most coding editors have a way of highlighting these names, so let me copy paste this. And now if I highlight with the double click receivables, the second one is highlighted automatically, so you know it's written correctly. For payables it's the same, So if I double click on it, the second one is now highlighted, and network in capital is already written correctly. So always check these variable names by double clicking them, and most code editors will highlight all of them then. Another common mistake is to miss brackets. So here for the array, we need to close it in the first line. And the second one here, the parameters, they also need brackets. Function itself, or the method in this case reduce, is fine. Down here, array sum is fine. So these were the two mistakes. Then there's the typical mistake of mixing up single and double quotation marks. So the first line here on the left is fine, but the third one is not. Always think in pairs when you use these quotation marks. For example, here the outer ones, I'll keep them as double quotation marks, but the ones for hashtag home, I'll make them single quotation marks. Now we have two pairs and everything works fine. So don't mix them up. Another mistake might be to mistake assignment operators with these comparison operators. So both are equal signs, and in JavaScript you use the assignment operator, the equal sign, only once. And for comparison you use it 2 times or even 3 times for strict equality. So in this case, on the left we've got if equals 1, y equals 2, and then x equals y in the if condition. Therefore x would be set to y, and else would never run. So when you want to have it as a comparison, most often in these conditions, you'll have to use more than one equal sign. And here in code line 5 we need that. So now you can see it works. And if I set y to 7, it displays the if. So result is equal. And if I have 7 and 9, it's the else. So result is not equal. When you use functions, so when you call them, here it's in code line 7, you need to have these parentheses added. So here for get9 it's missing, so add them. Then you're good. Also something that I like to forget. You need to be careful with the order of your arguments that you pass to your functions. On the right hand side we want to have raised to power. So we'll define a base and an exponent. The base is 2, the exponent 3. So the result should be 8, but our result is actually 9 because we've mixed up the arguments. So when we call raised to power, we have the exponent first and then the base. Therefore 3 would be raised to power 2, and this would result in 9. So we have it flipped. If you look at the raised to power function, b comes first as the first parameter, and the exponent is the second one, so we have to pass the arguments accordingly. First one must be base, second must be the exponent. And now it works, we've got 8 as a result printed out. Here we've got typical mistakes when we use loops. As examples, we've got the for loop 3 times on the left hand side. First one gives us the loop 1 times too many. But why is that? Because we've used I smaller or equal to len, which is the length of our alphabet variable. Second one gives it once too few, because we've got j set to 1 and not set to 0, and only the third loop is what we want. You can see that right here on the right hand side, we've got 2 to 5 and undefined, and it is because we've set I to 1, therefore it would start at the second position of our first 5 variable, which is the 2. Let us set it to 0 and we've got 1 through 5. It's still undefined, so we have to get rid of the equal sign right here for I smaller than for the length, and then we're good. Here we've got 2 for loops, one is nested inside of the other, so we've got an outer and an inner loop. And the problem is that we want to have a 3 times 2 array, but we don't have it. We have a 6 times 3, if I've read that correctly, and it's because we've got the row not reinitialized, as it's outside of the outer loop. So watch what happens if I just take this right here, code line 4, and I cut it out and paste it in code line 7. It would now be part of the outer loop, and therefore every time the outer loop runs, it will be reinitialized and reset to an empty array, you could say. And this is what gives us this 3 times 2 array. So sometimes you want to check the order and see if you have to put your variable initialization inside of the loop. In this case we had to. And this is also common. Sometimes you set up your loops so that they become infinite loops. Let us go over the example on the right hand side and you can see what's meant by this. So maybe I'll write it out in detail. So in the first round it would be I equals 1, so everything would work. Second round it would be incremented by 2, therefore I equals 3. And third round incremented by 2, we also had a 5, and therefore I would never become 4. So we've set up an infinite loop by doing this. So be careful with it. In this specific example, we just have to change the condition right here and make it smaller or equal to 4 instead of not equal 4. And now it runs exactly as we want it. And that's already it, so it was a shorter section this time. Next up would be the basic data structures. As always, I try to finish it for next Sunday. I hope this video was helpful, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.